In the early 1800s, the tiny hamlet of Plymouth Hollow, nestled in the hills of west central Connecticut, had fewer than 20 buildings. But one of them was Seth Thomas's clock shop, which would grow to reshape and dominate the town. Local craftsmen had made clocks in Plymouth Hollow as early as the late 1700s. Then gradually, Seth Thomas and other clockmakers in the region began to develop techniques of mass production, turning out tall wooden clocks in batches of 500 or more. As their techniques improved and as they learned to manufacture clocks from brass, they initiated a revolution that made timepieces, once a luxury item, available to people of limited means throughout the world. Seth Thomas's company and family soon dominated the town. At various times, he owned a brass factory, a cotton mill, and much of the town's farmland. In recognition of Seth Thomas's role, Plymouth Hollow was even renamed Thomastown. The Federal Works Progress Administration, or WPA, conducted an oral history in Thomaston half a century ago. One of those interviewed was Arthur Botsford, who started working at Seth Thomas when he was 15. He retired after working there for nearly 65 years. His father had come to Thomaston in 1847, Arthur Botsford told the WPA interviewer. I can remember my dad telling about the big general store Seth ran up near the center of town. You paid for what you got once a year. At the end of that time, some of them owed him money. They'd et more than they'd earned. The post office was kept in that store, too. Seth died in '59, and when he died, he owned plenty, not only buildings, but land and stock. The side hills was dotted with his sheep and cattle. He owned all the land around Marine and Litchfield streets, and down Grand Street and through the center of town. Indeed, a map in the town hall shows that in the mid-1800s, Seth Thomas owned nearly all of what is now downtown Thomaston. It was just assumed that almost everybody growing up in Thomaston would go to work at the Seth Thomas case shop, where the wooden cabinets were made, the movement shop where the clockworks were assembled, or one of the associated industries in the town. The WPA report noted that Thomaston schoolchildren used to chant, "Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. If the case shop don't get you, the movement shop must." August Hildebrand was one of the youngsters who grew up in Thomaston and went to work for Seth Thomas. Indeed, he worked there for more than 50 years. He came to Thomaston from Germany with his father, a clockmaker, 81 years ago. August's wife, Frida Hildebrand, also originally came from Germany. In 1941, she came to Thomaston. I recently interviewed the Hildebrands in a house where August had lived for 80 years. As we talked, we were surrounded by more than a dozen clocks. August Hildebrand recalled,
I never asked for a job in my life. This man was a foreman on Marine Street, was the foreman in the automatics, and I used to mow his grass, and he said, Augie, when you're ready, just walk in.
When I asked whether most people from Thomaston worked in Thomaston, August Hildebrand replied,
Seth Thomas in the Plume Atwood, yeah, because he had no automobiles, and there wasn't too many automobiles. I know when there was only about 2 or 3 cars in town.
Home and work were closely tied. Many workers walked home every day for lunch. Some people even did work for the company in their homes.
Like years ago, the company, I know 2 ladies in town that could take home these pinions, pinions, and then the little pins, and they would put the little pins in. It gave them something to do. They didn't, the 2 elderly ladies. My father here one time, the click spring on a main wheel, it was just a wire bent, see? And then when he got it, my mother had a little tool. She bent it and then bent it this way, and I still got the block in the cellar. My father flattened the spring out, see? It was a little homework, see, years ago.
Much of the housing in Thomaston was originally company housing. A group of houses Seth Thomas built for his cotton mill workers was known as Cotton Row. Stacia Monzonsky, who grew up in the Seth Thomas Clock Company housing, recalled, They were all the same. There were only 4 rooms. We had to go pay our rent on Elm Street. Seth Thomas was right there. But then, if you didn't work at Seth Thomas, you had to move from those houses. The Hildebrands recalled,
They would own. You see, that way they kept the people in the town. Now, Seth Thomas used to, years ago, they had built their own houses for their employees and this and that, see?
Like, I used to live on North Main Street. All those houses used to belong to Plume Atwood for their workers. I don't know if they owned them right away or if they rented them. That I don't know. But I know most of those houses were Bloomin' Edward employees.
There was houses on East Main Street owned by Seth Thomas.
Seth Thomas's son and then his grandson continued to run the Seth Thomas Company until 1919. It eventually became a division of the General Time Corporation. In 1982, Tally Industries, a multinational conglomerate that had acquired General Time, announced unexpectedly that the Seth Thomas division would be moved to Georgia. Seth Thomas workers and Thomaston residents marked the end of their nearly 2 centuries of clockmaking by carrying a grandfather clock through the town to a symbolic funeral. Reverend Henry Cody of St. Thomas Parish in Thomaston, in his eulogy said, "We mourn for the workers who served with dedication, loyalty, and skill. We ask for a resurrection here, that people may again have a chance to create." In 1984, the Thomaston Public Library, like the WPA nearly half a century before, launched an oral history project to preserve the memories of Thomaston's clockworkers. James Wilson, former operations supervisor of the Tally Industries Computer Center in Thomaston, recalled the day Seth Thomas closed. "I was the last one out of the building. Everything else was gone, all your divisions. It was eerie. We wished all the people from Seth Thomas goodbye. It was like a morgue." Thomaston residents, it turned out, still identified strongly with what they considered their company. Many mentioned with pride the gigantic Colgate clock built in Thomaston, which can be seen across the Hudson River when you drive down the west side of New York City. Matthew Monahan, a former Seth Thomas employee who became Thomaston's postmaster, noted that when the Seth Thomas Company left Thomaston, "I was very sad about it. It just seemed as though Seth Thomas was Thomaston. If you ever travel anywhere in the Navy or anywhere, they might not know where Thomaston was, but if you mention Seth Thomas clocks, they all had a Seth Thomas clock in their home. The Navy ships had Seth Thomas clocks. When I got to Hawaii, I'd see Seth Thomas clocks. Even in Japan, I saw Seth Thomas clocks. They were known throughout the world." Another former Seth Thomas worker, Francis Kane, added that he didn't like Seth Thomas being moved to Georgia. "I figured it really belonged to Thomaston. That's where it originated."